You must define success always. I always say champions that come in pairs of two. The individual, as great as they can be, is only as good as their counterpart pushing them. Why is that so beautiful? Because one is accountability. It's very easy for you to make an excuse on excellence to yourself. You make a pact with yourself, I'm going to do this, right? But you don't tell anybody, you say it to yourself. Very easy for you to find the reason on why you can't do it that day. But if you make a pact with someone else, it's very hard for you to bail on somebody else. We can bail on ourselves all day long, but you gotta be a low motherfucker to bail on someone else's progress for excellence. So most of the time when you're a partner, they keep you honest to your goal. Now that role switches back and forth, the coin flips, where you are actually motivating him on his bad days. But together, with a partner, you get this shit done.
What is up, YouTube? Live via satellite here, and today we are talking Kingdom, manga chapter 569. In this chapter, guys, to me was a great chapter of Kingdom. Now, was it flawless? Absolutely not. But all things considered, I think this chapter was done very, very well. But the thing I'm seeing most people having an issue with is pretty much either the jump or the fact that Bajio and Yotanwa were still able to fight. And of course, we'll go deeper into that as we talk about the chapter, because I really didn't have too much of an issue with it. But to me, like, everybody's overlooking the most egregious thing in this entire chapter. And that's this nonsense right here. I don't even know how hard could have brought himself to draw such disgusting imagery. He's drawn such things as Kanki's gift, Mangoku sitting on a pile of corpses, even drawing young boys nibbling on a grown man's toes. But it's here where I just have to draw the line. Besmirching the face of Yotanwa is unacceptable, and I'm sure that most Kingdom fans would absolutely agree with me.
Ooh, Yotanwa just got punched in the face.
He was like, man, fuck that shit. Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do.
No! No!
And one dude just comes in with a haymaker right to Yotanwa. No.
Yes, give it a one bang. Boom, shut up. You shouldn't even be alive right now. Shut up.
I didn't say all, I said most. But getting back to the chapter, guys, the chapter picks up right where we left off with Bajio and Yotanwa taking their leap of faith across the Saha Canyon. And amazingly, this week we find out that they made it successfully across. And before we get into the details of this jump, we first got to talk about these Kwangrang soldiers on the other side. These guys were actually cracking me up because first they were so afraid of Yotanwa and Bajio both falling to their deaths, because if they died, then they knew Rosa would kill them. But the second thing that cracked me up was, even though they were talking about how impossible this jump was, once they saw that Bajio and Yotanwa had cleared the jump, they actually did not know what to do with themselves. It was so bad that some soldiers were trying to hype other soldiers up to try to make that jump.
You can do it!
Which of course absolutely none of them wanted to try. But getting back to the jump itself, I really wasn't too surprised, because in my last review I thought there was 3 possibilities. And the first one I had mentioned was the fact that they could possibly make it, because I did think that the other side of the canal was a bit lower than the one that Bajio was jumping from, which actually to me makes a major difference. For instance, in France there's a jump called the manpower gap, and crazy people from all over come to jump this thing. But the thing is that the distance would normally be too large of a gap to be able to jump successfully, but because the other side of the gap is a bit lower than the point you're jumping from, you're easily able to make a jump that would be otherwise impossible. And even when you look in some of the panels with the Kwangrang soldiers, you actually see them all looking downward. And even though I thought the other side of the canal was a little bit lower in the previous chapter, it was actually much easier to tell in this chapter how low it actually was. But if you did think it was a stretch, I'm not really going to even argue with you about it. It is what it is. I think the way that Hard drew it made it look like something more than what it actually was. But trust me, this isn't the first time something like that's happened.
Angie, this right here is a map of downtown Saginaw, and this construction is happening along North Michigan, starting at Houghton Avenue and going all the way to State Avenue. Drivers are down to the single lane in each direction, and local businesses are paying the price.
But getting back to the Kwanwon soldiers on the other side, once they notice that Bajio and Yotanwa are still moving and still alive, they decide to take a little detour to a bridge that will take them to the other side of the canal. And they believe this is possible because falling from that height, they believe that Yotanwa and Bajio can't come out of it unscathed, and that at this point they should be no more than cripples. And we actually see that they've learned from a previous mistake because they've decided to not even use their horns to signal other troops of their location because they don't want to signal Yotanwa's crew in the process. And then we actually get to see the aftermath of Yotanwa and Bajio's fall. And judging by the looks of the forest, you can tell that they crashed through a ton of trees on their way down to the ground, which I would think was probably better than just landing straight on the ground because I would think the trees would have broken their fall at least a little bit. And then we actually get to see Bajio and Yotanwa themselves, and they're actually looking pretty beat up. And I'm not going to go over the whole conversation, but what I found most interesting about the conversation was that this wasn't their first rodeo. This isn't the first time they've been in a situation this dire. And as they're reminiscing about all the hard-fought battles they've won, when things got really tough, it always would seem to come down to just the two of them.
Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us.
And the more I looked at this scene was so reminiscent to how Shin and Kyokai were in chapter 550. Even the way how Shin was apologizing to Kyokai for having her always cover his ass, it seemed like Yotanwa was saying something similar to Bajio when she was saying that had they never met, she may have never even become king, and that he probably would have never had to spill so much of his own blood. And another interesting thing that Yotanwa says when she's discussing the opponents they face, like the Mirror tribe and the Kiyome tribe, which is the tribe that Ten originally came from, she says that even though they were all very tough opponents, the toughest person she's ever faced was actually Bajio himself. And I really enjoyed seeing deeper into this relationship between Bajio and Yotanwa, but I have to admit, it really actually kind of scares me in a way because it almost feels like a bit of a death flag being put on Bajio. But Bajio and Yotanwa's conversation is briefly interrupted as they realize that the Kwanrong have finally found them. But as they're struggling to get to their feet, Yotanwa continues her conversation with Bajio about this oath that he made, and that she really doesn't remember him swearing anything to her. But as the Kwanrong have them completely surrounded, Bajio says to her that it was an oath he made to himself. And as they go back to back preparing for this fight, he says that he'll enlighten her on it when he gets the chance. But it's at this point in the chapter that I think a lot of people may have missed some minor details that give us clues to what exactly happened between Bajio and Yotanwa since their fall. And what I mean by that is when we first see them after the jump, they're both laying down resting. And if you notice in every single panel since their jump, Yotanwa is no longer wearing her cape. And that's because she actually did two things with this cape. Most of it, she wrapped it around Bajio's midsection to tend to his wounds, but another portion of the cape was used to wrap around her leg and make a splint for her injured foot. And the reason I think that's important is because one, it explains why Yotanwa was really able to stand up and fight again, and two, I think it shows that a lot more time has passed since they first arrived in the forest and these soldiers actually showing up. Then back over at Rozo and Sensuiju, we see that they're getting reports about exactly what's been going on with Bajio and Yotanwa. And hearing that Bajio and Yotanwa were able to jump over the canyon, Rozo wonders if they're even human. But hearing from the messenger that they were able to stay on their trail and that they were in the process of catching them as they speak, Sensuiju believes that they should be sending more cavalry out to assist because they shouldn't be underestimating them now just because they're injured. But it's funny here because the messenger actually almost mocks Sensuiju, saying that making that jump over the canyon, it would be a miracle if they were even breathing. And on cue, we get Bajio and Yotanwa just slicing through the Kwanrong troops, letting us know that miracles are possible. And even though Yotanwa and Bajio are giving it everything they have, the Kwangrang commander doesn't intend to underestimate them any longer, as he doesn't care how many people Bajio and Yotanwa kill, because he feels as though they have the numbers to spare. And this is actually where things start to turn for the worse for Bajio and Yotanwa, because a soldier that I'm sure Bajio had thought he already killed is still alive on the ground and stabs Bajio in the leg, which creates a domino effect of him being caught off guard and slashed across his mask and stabbed through the arm, which then causes Yotanwa to turn around in concern and then get caught off guard with the most disrespectful haymaker I think I've ever seen. This is definitely no way to treat a woman. And of course, Yotanwa makes him pay with his life, but unfortunately that bit of time allowed for another Kwangrang soldier to come in with the knee, knocking Yotanwa unconscious. And as they're taking her away, we see that Bajio is in no position to help himself, as he can only watch on as the Kwangrang have him pinned to the ground with his mask literally breaking into pieces. And as he's thinking about the oath he swore, we find ourselves in a flashback of when he and Yotanwa first met. And it's actually pretty cool because we actually get to see how the fight between Yotanwa and Bajio actually really went. And we learn from Bajio that this was the first time he actually felt fear. And as Yotanwa was kicking him around and telling him that if he continues to act like an animal, then she'll just kill him right here and now. But if he takes back his humanity, she will gladly welcome him into her family. And then it appears that Bajio alludes to the fact that this is the first time he actually felt something else as well. And even though at the time he wasn't able to understand her words, they were still enough to do something to him. What it is he never actually says, but to be honest, it appears that it was at this moment that Bajio actually fell in love with Yotanwa. And it's at this moment that we actually come out of the flashback with Bajio and his renewed strength, tossing and slicing all the Kwangrang soldiers off of him, remembering to himself that it was at that time that he swore in his heart that no matter who the foe might be, even if it cost him his own life, that he would protect her. And as the Kwangrang men are in shock and thinking that this is Bajio's last struggle, you can clearly see that Yotanwa is somewhat conscious as she's thinking about Bajio, but we do know that Bajio has now reverted back to his former self that we've seen in the flashbacks. And the clearest sign of this isn't even his inhuman ability right now. It's actually the speech bubble coming from Bajio in that panel where we see that his words have reverted back to the words that he used when we seen him try to talk in the flashback and Yotanwa kicked him in the head and told him to speak the words of men. They're the exact same type of characters. Then we move over to the chieftain of the Karjan tribe, and as he's gathering all the remnants of his tribe together, he informs them of Yotanwa's message and that they need to get to the rendezvous point before the sun rises. The most shocking bit of information that the chieftain relays to his tribe is that the rendezvous point is actually the Kwangrang city. And with that, we segue over to Old Man Impo finally. And when we get to him, we actually get a pretty good bit of information out of him. First off, he lets us know that this trick that Yotanwa is pulling is something that she's done many times before. She knows that her position on the field makes her the most attractive bait, and that he's sure that the Kwangrang would have fell for this because evidently he and many others have fell for this same tactic, saying that Yotanwa is the most cunning in all the mountain realm. And then he throws in a series of complaints saying that she works her people to the bone, and just because they took a huge army, it's not like they left this place unguarded. But all his complaining stops when he starts to think about what his reward could possibly be, because even though he's an old man, he's still a man, and if he can have Yotanwa fawning all over him at the end of this battle, it would be well worth it. And apparently that was all the motivation he needed, because we see him and his tribe scaling the wall in order to make the counterattack. And the fastest of them all is none other than the chieftain of the Inshu tribe, Old Man Impo. And that was the chapter in a nutshell, guys. So yeah, like I said, that was another great chapter of Kingdom. I was so glad that we got to finally see what Impo was up to because it was taking so long to get to that point. But everybody pretty much called it. Everybody was right about it. But in particular, man, my boy Twale hit the nail right on the head, because I had actually thought that Impo would actually use the tunnels to infiltrate the city. But I do remember Twale saying, whether it was in one of his videos or in one of the comments, that Impo and his tribe would actually scale the walls to get into the city. So kudos to you, man. But it was so funny to see that even Impo, an old man, even he wants to be a part of the race for Yotanwa's nether regions. It's just amazing at this point, and I really loved how we found out all this information about how Yotanwa has been pretty much using herself as bait throughout this entire night to achieve her plan to take over Ryoyu. And to be honest, man, I really cannot wait till we get to the chapter where we finally get to see the shocked look on Rozo and Sensuiju's face as they've been chasing Yotanwa all through the night, all over the place, only to come home in the morning to find out their city's been captured. But before we can get to that glorious moment, we first got to get out of the situation that we're in, right? And what I see happening is one of two things. Either Bajio in beast mode is going to be able to defeat a lot of these men and maybe grab Yotanwa and take off, or someone's going to intervene, somebody like either the Figo King or Heki. You know what? Nope, scratch Heki. Let's say Kitari instead. So either the Figo King or Kitari is going to arrive. There is a third option, and the third option would be them actually being captured. But because I really don't see that happening at all, because it kind of wouldn't make sense. They've jumped over a canyon, Bajio's went into beast mode, and to do all that and then have them be captured would kind of feel like a waste. So I really think that something has to happen that's going to get her back to her people in one piece. But I can't deny that things look very bad at the moment, and they look especially bad for Bajio, who appears to be like on his last leg. Even though I really don't think he's gonna die, if he did, I really kind of wouldn't be surprised by it. But something that actually did kind of surprise me this chapter was kind of what was implied about Bajio's feelings toward Yotanwa. Like, to be honest, I never really thought of Yotanwa and Bajio like as a thing. I really only ever seen him as like her right hand man, her like go-to guy. And not saying that he doesn't deserve her, because he absolutely deserves her, but Bajio kind of reminds me of Jorah Mormont here, and just like Danny's, Yotanwa's friend zone is probably hard to escape. So another thing that seemed to be an issue with this chapter that I wanted to discuss was the fact that Bajio and Yotanwa were still able to fight after their jump across the canyon. And to me, it was actually a pretty simple thing for Yotanwa, because she's not actually the one who jumped across the canyon, you know what I mean? She was being held by Bajio. And when it comes to the foot, she was actually able to fight on it a little bit in the previous chapter. But even still in this chapter, we saw that she was able to take care of it a little bit off screen when she had it all wrapped up. And the fact that they were able to get all of this like first aid done between her and Bajio, it actually makes me think that they actually had a little bit more time to rest than most people think. But when it comes to Bajio, I'm not even going to argue that point, because I mean, hey, Bajio is just doing superhuman things. So I absolutely respect it if you want to call Hara out on that one. But I'm not going to do that, because if you did, you'd have to go back through all of Kingdom and start questioning a lot of things that happened. Should Hoken be able to stop a barrage of arrows by twirling his weapon like a baton? Should Kyokai really be stronger than most people in the series because she has a sword that talks to her? Should a ragtag group of civilians be able to hold off an entire army just because their king is in the city, like the Battle of Sai? Even when you look at Riboku himself, I've often wondered how this man's hair continuously floats since he's been introduced into the series. And you can't even say it's because he's outside, because we've seen his hair magically in action even when he's behind closed doors. The point I'm trying to make here is that Kingdom is a series that seamlessly blends reality with a small bit of the over-the-top stuff. And that's like the beauty of it, and that's what makes it Kingdom. But that's just my personal opinion. So moving on to this week's comment of the week, this one comes from David Bowen. And I'm just going to take a piece of what he actually wrote, and what he said was, I really wasn't too keen on seeing Yotanwa as the damsel in distress, but I didn't want to see her win by some plot convenience either, so this was a realistic outcome considering how outnumbered her forces were. And I totally agree with this point, because at first I was really upset about it. I didn't like the fact that Hara had Yotanwa being rescued, especially after all the hype we've had for Yotanwa throughout the series. It's almost like I kind of expect her to be able to overcome anything, you know? But after reading this chapter and seeing that scene between Bajio and Yotanwa, and actually being reminded of the time where Shin and Kyokai were in a similar position, it actually made me think about the fact that no one person can get everything done. You know, everybody needs help. Everybody needs that proverbial partner in crime. And just like how we see Shin have to lean on Kyokai from time to time, it's understandable that from time to time Yotanwa has to do the same thing with Bajio. But anyway, guys, that about does it for this week's review. Let me know what you guys thought of the chapter in the comments section below. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and feel free to share, comment, and subscribe. Peace out.